the garage then, across the open clearing where the grass meets the trees. We can list it by the end of the month, she said. They'll move into the small guest room above the garage until closing. Ethan laughed again, louder this time, scanning the yard like he was already picturing his own furniture out here. Finally, he said. Some real space for a real family. I felt the words hit me square in the chest, but I didn't flinch. I'd spent years perfecting that. Instead, I folded the blanket once more, slow and deliberate, and set it on the table. Jade's eyes flicked up to me, quick, careful, waiting for what I would do. I gave her the smallest nod, the one that meant stay calm, stay quiet, the one we'd both learned too early. Mom turned to me then like she'd just remembered I was standing there. It's for the best, she said. You'll understand once you think about it. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not yet. 6 days later, I almost lost the log home my grandfather built with his own hands. Then that night, I heard my brother's laughter through the phone line, and it was so cold it changed everything. If you want to know how I stopped them, how I finally drew the line they never expected me to draw, and what happened to the people who thought family meant taking whatever you wanted, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't believe what I found hidden in the old storage shed. That afternoon, after the yard finally went quiet again, I stood in the kitchen staring at the coffee pot like it might give me answers. I'd been a widow for 3 years by then. My husband died in a logging accident up near Fairbanks, one of those sudden no-warning calls that still wake me up some nights. Jade was only 6 when it happened. She'd been adopted 2 years earlier, a quiet little girl with dark curls and eyes that watched everything too carefully. After the accident, it was just the two of us in this big log home my grandfather built back in the 80s. I turned the cabin into our lifeline. I kept the wood stoves running, maintained the trails through the pines, and started selling handmade items online. Carved spoons, birch bark baskets, salmon skin wallets. Things tourists and gift shops couldn't get enough of during the short summer season. The income was steady enough, especially once I figured out shipping and built a small website. Long hours at the computer after Jade went to bed, packaging orders before dawn, driving the long gravel road into town twice a week to mail them. It paid the property taxes, the heating oil, the internet bill. And it also paid for a lot more than that. It started small, the way these things always do. Mom needed help with a new roof on her place down in Anchorage. A few thousand, no big deal. Then Ethan lost his seasonal job at the cannery and asked for a loan to cover rent until the next season. I sent it. When Tucker was born, there were medical bills Mom swore insurance didn't cover. I paid those too. Fertility treatments before that, because Ethan and April wanted a child so badly. Deposits on a bigger apartment when they decided their old one was too cramped. Car repairs, credit card balances, a down payment on a used truck so Ethan could haul firewood. I never asked for anything back. I told myself it was what family did, especially after Dad passed, and Mom was left managing everything alone. I was the older one, the one with the stable income, the one who didn't complain. A few hundred here, a couple thousand there. I set up automatic transfers so Mom wouldn't have to ask every time. It made life easier for her. Over the years, it added up. One winter, I sat down with a calculator and almost couldn't breathe when I saw the total. More than $40,000 in the last 4 years alone. Money I'd earned sanding boards until my fingers bled, staying up until the northern lights faded so I could finish orders. Money that could have gone toward a new roof for our own place, or college savings for Jade, or just a buffer for the long, dark months when orders slowed. But I kept sending it, because every time I hesitated, Mom would say things like, "Family helps family," or "You have so much space up there, we're barely scraping by." And Ethan would call and talk about how hard things were, how Tucker needed this or that, how they were trying so hard. Meanwhile, Jade got treated like an afterthought. Family photos where she stood off to the side, birthdays where Tucker got the big gifts, and Jade got a card with a 20 tucked inside. Mom would pat her head and call her sweet girl, never using her name. Ethan barely spoke to her at all. April was polite enough, but it was clear they saw Jade as temporary, not real family the way Tucker was. The worst part was the house itself. This cabin wasn't just walls and a roof. Grandpa Clyde built every log of it with his own hands after he retired from the pipeline. When his health started failing 5 years ago, strokes and memory issues, Mom took over everything power of attorney Bill's decisions. She convinced him to let Jade and me live here temporarily so the place wouldn't sit empty. I paid every utility, replaced the aging generator, fixed water lines that froze, kept the driveway cleared all winter. Mom still called it the family property, meaning hers to decide. I knew the pattern was toxic long before that afternoon in the yard. I'd felt it growing, the slow drain on my bank account and my patience. But I stayed quiet because I was raised to be the responsible one, the one who didn't rock the boat, the one who fixed things instead of breaking them. Standing there watching the coffee drip, I realized I'd been funding a life where my own daughter was invisible, where my home was seen as spare space waiting to be claimed, and I was done pretending that was normal. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees that evening, I couldn't sit still any longer. I pulled out the flattened cardboard boxes I'd stored in the mudroom for someday moves that never came. Jade watched me from the doorway, still holding the painted pine cone from earlier. I didn't say much at first. I just started taping the bottoms shut, the sharp rip of the tape louder than it should have been in the quiet house. She walked over slowly and sat cross-legged on the living room rug. "Are we really leaving?" she asked, voice small but steady. I paused with the tape gun in my hand. "We're not staying where we're not wanted," I said. It came out firmer than I felt. Jade nodded once, like she'd already figured that out on her own. Then she stood up and went to her room without another word. I heard her dresser drawers sliding open, the soft thud of clothes landing in her backpack. That hit harder than anything Mom had said outside. My 8-year-old knew exactly how to pack to leave. She'd learned it from watching me hold everything together too many times. I started with the kitchen. Plates wrapped in newspaper mugs nested together, the cast iron skillet I'd seasoned myself set carefully in its own box. Every item I touched carried a memory of meals cooked here after long days, Jade helping stir soup while snow piled against the windows. I labeled each box in black marker: kitchen, fragile, books, linens, like order could make this less devastating. Jade came back carrying her backpack already heavy and a small shoebox filled with her rock collection from the creek. She set it down and started helping me fold throw blankets into another box. Her hands were careful, precise, folding corners the way I'd shown her for laundry. "Do I have to leave my books?" she asked. "No," I said. "We'll take everyone." She gave a tiny, relieved breath and went to her shelf. I watched her pull down her favorites, stacking them gently. She didn't cry. She didn't ask why Grandma wanted us gone or why Tucker needed our yard more. She just packed quiet and efficient, like disappearing was a skill she'd mastered. I carried boxes to the guest room above the garage, the one Mom had so casually assigned us that afternoon. The stairs creaked under the weight. Dust floated in the dim light from the single bulb. The space smelled unused, cold. A single bed, a dresser, bare walls. I set the first boxes down and stood there a minute, feeling the reality sink in. This was what they thought we deserved. Back downstairs, Jade had moved to her art supplies. She lined up markers, sorted colored pencils, wrapped her sketchpad in a plastic bag. I crouched beside her. "You okay, kiddo?" I asked. She shrugged. "I guess." Then quieter. "Will we have a yard at the new place?" My throat closed. "We'll find one," I managed. She nodded again and kept packing. It was past 10 when we finally stopped. The living room looked half empty already, boxes lined against one wall like soldiers waiting for orders. Jade sat on the couch, with her stuffed fox tucked under her arm, eyes heavy. I told her to get ready for bed. She hugged me longer than usual, then patted down the hall. I stayed in the kitchen, cleaning up tape scraps, trying to keep my hands busy so my mind wouldn't spin. The house felt too big and too small at the same time. Every creak of the logs settling sounded like judgment. Around 10:30, my phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, thinking it was Mom checking if I'd come to my senses. But the message wasn't from her. Don't leave yet. Check the old storage shed by the garage. Grandpa. My stomach dropped. Grandpa Clyde hadn't texted in years. He hated phones, said the screens were too small and the buttons hurt his fingers. If he needed something, he called from the nursing home landline, slow and deliberate. Or he waited until one of us visited. This didn't sound like him. No typos, no hesitation, just 3 crisp lines. I read it again, then a third time. The screen dimmed, then brightened when I touched it like it was waiting for me. The house went quieter than before. I could hear Jade's soft breathing down the hall, steady now that she'd finally fallen asleep. She'd packed half her room without being told twice. I set the phone down and listened to the silence. The message felt urgent. Hidden. I glanced toward the window. Outside, the yard was dark except for moonlight on the snow patches that hadn't melted yet. The storage shed sat attached to the far side of the garage door, padlocked since last fall. Grandpa had always kept tools there. Old files, things he didn't want in the main house. Mom had a key, but I had one too from when I helped him organize years ago. Another buzz. Same unknown number. Please. Before it's too late. My pulse picked up. I grabbed my coat from the hook, slipped on boots quietly, and took the heavy flashlight from the drawer. The back door opened with its familiar groan. Cold night air rushed in. I stepped out, flashlight beam cutting through the dark, and headed toward the shed. Whatever was waiting there was about to change everything. The padlock on the storage shed door was stiff from months of cold, but it finally clicked open with a rusty snap. I pulled the door wide enough to slip inside, flashlight beam sweeping across stacked crates, old snowshoes hanging on nail shelves of canned goods Grandpa had put up years ago. The air smelled of sawdust, motor oil, and something metallic. The floorboards groaned under my boots as I moved deeper. I wasn't sure what I was looking for. The message had been vague on purpose, I figured. I started near the back wall behind the riding mower he hadn't used in a decade. The paint there looked off a slightly lighter patch where dust hadn't settled the same way. I crouched, ran my fingers along the baseboard, and felt a seam that shouldn't be there. A panel loose. My heart kicked hard. I wedged the flashlight under my chin and pried with both hands. It popped free easier than expected. Behind it, tucked between studs, sat a small metal lockbox and a thick plastic-wrapped envelope. Both were cold to the touch. The envelope had my name written across the front in Grandpa Clyde's careful block letters. Sonia. I carried everything back to the house, locking the shed behind me out of habit. Inside, I set the items on the kitchen table under the single overhead light. The boxes we'd packed earlier stood silent in the corner like witnesses. I sat down, hands unsteady, and peeled open the envelope first. A letter lay on top, folded once. Grandpa's handwriting slower now, but still unmistakable. Sonia, if you're reading this, your mother has tried to take the cabin from you and Jade. I'm sorry I didn't stop it sooner. I told her no many times. She didn't listen. This home isn't something to be handed to whoever complains loudest. It's yours. You've kept it standing. You've paid the bills, fixed the leaks, shoveled the drive when no one else showed up. You kept Jade safe when others barely noticed her. I changed the trust last year. Had it done quietly with the attorney in town. Your mother is no longer trustee. You are. The deed transfer is already recorded. She has no legal right to sell. Call the lawyer. His card is in here. He knows this might happen. And Sonia, opened the lockbox. You need to see what they've been doing with the money meant for my care. I love you both. Grandpa Clyde. I read it twice then. A third time, tears blurring the ink. My chest felt tight, like I'd been holding my breath for years, and finally let it out. The folder underneath held official papers, a trust amendment stamped and notarized naming me sole trustee and beneficiary. A recorded deed in my name only dated over a year ago. Mom had stood in my yard with a realtor while having zero authority to list the place. But the lockbox was worse. I found the key taped inside the envelope and opened it. Inside were bank statements, printouts, handwritten notes in Grandpa's shaky script. Withdrawals that didn't match nursing home fees. Large transfers to Mom's account. Checks to cash signed by her. Payments to Ethan for truck repairs and family help that totaled thousands. Next to one entry, Grandpa had scrawled, "Asked Elaine about this." She said it was for Tucker's school. It wasn't. Another note told her to stop. She promised. Then another withdrawal. Page after page of it. Money meant for his medication, his room, his comfort funneled away, while he sat in that facility trusting his daughter to handle things right. This wasn't just entitlement, it was theft. Straight up draining an elderly man who couldn't fight back. Everything snapped into place. The rush to sell the cabin. The realtor already lined up. The casual plan to move Jade and me into the tiny guest room. They weren't just greedy, they were desperate. The sale would cover the holes they'd dug in Grandpa's accounts before anyone noticed. I sat back, hands flat on the table, feeling something shift inside me. Not rage, exactly. Clarity. Cold and sharp. I wasn't going to pack another box. I wasn't going to explain or negotiate or soften anything for them. I was going to protect what was mine, what was Jade's, what Grandpa had made sure stayed with us. I closed the lockbox, slid the papers back into the envelope, and tucked everything into the drawer under the silverware tray. Secure but easy to grab tomorrow. Then I walked down the hall to check on Jade. She was curled under her blanket, stuffed fox clutched tight, breathing slow and even. Her backpack still sat open by the bed, half-packed like she'd fallen asleep waiting for the next instruction. I pulled the door almost shut and stood there a moment. Something settled in me. Not triumph. Just resolve. Tomorrow I would make the calls. Morning light filtered through the kitchen window when I finally poured coffee and picked up the phone. The lawyer Grandpa Clyde had named answered on the third ring. I gave my name, mentioned the envelope. He didn't sound surprised. "Your grandfather warned me this call might come one day," he said. "The amendment is solid. You're the sole trustee now. Your mother has no authority to list or sell the property." I asked about next steps. He walked me through sending formal notice revoking any old powers, then suggested I secure the bank accounts linked to Grandpa's care fund immediately. "Better safe than sorry," he added. I thanked him, hung up, and opened my laptop. Logged into the bank portal Grandpa had given me access to years ago for emergencies. One by one, I removed Mom's linked accounts, stopped automatic transfers, changed passwords, enabled two-factor. Confirmation emails arrived fast. The money flow stopped cold. I didn't feel victorious, just steady, lighter somehow. Jade wandered in around 9, hair tousled, rubbing her eyes. She stopped when she saw the stacked boxes still waiting in the corner. "Are we still moving?" she asked. "Not today," I told her. "Maybe not ever." Her face shifted, cautious hope flickering. "So my room is still mine?" "Yes." I knelt and pulled her into a hug. "This is our home. It stays that way." She smiled small, like she didn't trust it to last, then went to pour cereal. The storm hit that afternoon. I was unloading groceries from the truck when Mom's SUV crunched up the gravel drive. No warning. She stepped out, first folder still in hand, face tight. Ethan and April climbed out behind her, Tucker trailing with a toy truck. Mom marched straight to the front door. "You've had time to think," she called through the screen before I even reached the steps. "Let's talk reasonably." I set the bags down and walked over slowly. "There's nothing to talk about." Ethan snorted. "Come on, Sonia. We're family." I pulled the envelope from my coat pocket and held it up. "Grandpa changed the trust. I'm trustee. The cabin isn't for sale." Mom's eyes narrowed. He wouldn't do that without telling me. He did, I said. Over a year ago. It's recorded. April shifted Tucker to her other hip. This is ridiculous. We need the space. Ethan stepped closer. Real family needs room to grow. Jade appeared in the doorway behind me, quiet watching. Mom tried softer. Think of Tucker. Think of your brother. I looked her straight in the eye. I'm thinking of my daughter. Ethan muttered something under his breath. Mom reached for the door handle. I stepped back and closed the solid inner door, turned the deadbolt. The click echoed. Outside, voices rose. Mom knocked hard. Open this door, Sonia. I didn't answer. Ethan banged once. You're making a mistake. Then quiet. I heard shuffling footsteps retreating. I thought they'd left. But my phone buzzed minutes later. Unknown number again. I almost didn't pick up, but something made me. It connected to an open line. No greeting. Just background noise. Car doors shutting, engines starting. Then Ethan's voice, clear and close, thinking the call had ended. She actually thinks she can keep it. Once the insurance payout hits from that fake flood claim on Grandpa's old policy, we'll have enough to force a buyout anyway. She'll cave when the money's gone. A low laugh from him, cold and satisfied. Always does. Mom's voice muffled. Just wait till the bank freezes everything. She'll come begging. The line went dead. I stood frozen, phone still at my ear. That laugh cut deeper than anything shouted through the door. It wasn't just greed, it was calculated. They'd planned more than one way to take what wasn't theirs. Jade tugged my sleeve. Are they gone? I looked down at her. Yes. Are we safe? I locked eyes with her and answered honestly. We are now. Outside, the SUV finally pulled away, gravel spitting under tires. Inside, the house felt different. Solid. Ours. I leaned against the locked door long after the sound faded, feeling the weight of the choice settle. No explanations, no apologies, just a line drawn clear and final. Jade stayed close, hand in mine. For the first time in years, the silence inside felt safe. The fallout came faster than I expected. 2 days later, my phone started buzzing with voicemails I didn't answer at first. Mom's voice cracked on the first one, asking why transfers weren't going through anymore. Ethan left 3 messages, each angrier than the last, demanding I fix whatever I'd done. I saved them all, not for drama, just in case. By the end of that week, the bank sent official letters. Grandpa Clyde's care account was frozen pending review of irregular activity. They flagged the withdrawals as potential elder financial exploitation and launched an investigation. Automatic payments to the nursing home continued from a protected portion, but everything else stopped. Ethan's part-time job guiding summer tours vanished overnight. The outfitter he worked for ran background checks tied to credit reports for insurance reasons. When his score tanked from overdrafts and missed payments, they let him go. He texted me once, "This is your fault." I didn't reply. April called a few days after that. Her voice trembled over the line. She didn't yell, she begged, said rent was due. Tucker needed new shoes for school. They were short on groceries. She promised it would be the last time if I just sent something to tide them over. I can't, I said. And I won't. She went quiet, then whispered, "You're letting your own niece go without I'm not the one who spent money that wasn't yours." I answered and ended the call. Mom tried next. She drove up unannounced one afternoon, alone this time. I saw her SUV from the window and met her on the porch before she could knock. "I need to talk," she said, eyes red. There's nothing left to say. She tried anyway. Said family stuck together through hard times, that Grandpa would want us to help each other. I let her talk until she ran out of words. When she finished, I handed her the formal notice from the lawyer revoking her authority. She stared at it like it was written in another language. "You're destroying us," she said finally. "No," I replied. "You did that yourselves." She left without another word. The real break happened the following week. Mom went to the nursing home thinking she could smooth things over with Grandpa Clyde directly. She brought flowers and his favorite cookies, planning to explain everything away. I heard about it later from the head nurse who called to update me as the new decision maker. Mom walked into the common room smiling, acting like nothing had changed. Grandpa Clyde was in his wheelchair by the window watching birds at the feeder. When he saw her, his face hardened. The nurse said he looked straight at her and spoke loud enough for staff and other residents to hear. "I know what you did with my money," he said. "You and Ethan. Taking it while I couldn't stop you." Mom tried to hush him, said he was confused. He shook his head. "I'm not confused. I'm done. You're not welcome here anymore." She argued, voice rising, but security escorted her out when she wouldn't leave quietly. Grandpa told the nurse he didn't want visits or calls from her again. They updated the records that day. Word spread fast in their small circle down in Anchorage. Friends stopped inviting them to things. Ethan's old co-workers avoided him at the store. Bills piled up faster than they could juggle. April texted once more, asking if I'd at least cover Tucker's daycare so she could pick up extra shifts. I didn't respond. I didn't feel joy watching it unfold. Just a quiet relief that the pattern had finally broken. The constant pull, the expectation that I'd always step in, was gone. Jade noticed the change too. She stopped glancing at the door every time a car passed on the gravel road. She started leaving her toys scattered in the living room again, trusting they'd still be there tomorrow. One evening, she asked if Grandma and Uncle Ethan were mad at us forever. "I don't know," I said honestly, "but we're okay either way." She thought about that, then nodded and went back to drawing. The days grew longer with spring approaching. Snow melted in patches around the cabin. I focused on orders on Jade, on the life we were building without apologies. Their world kept shrinking. Ours stayed steady. Weeks blurred into months as the snow finally gave way to mud and then green. I heard about the divorce through a mutual acquaintance who still lived in Anchorage. April filed first. The papers cited irreconcilable differences, but everyone knew the real reason: debt they couldn't outrun. Credit cards, maxed eviction notices on the apartment utilities shut off more than once. Ethan's unemployment ran out, and the odd jobs he picked up weren't enough. Arguments turned constant. April took Tucker and moved in with her sister temporarily. The court got involved when April requested emergency child support. Ethan couldn't pay. His credit was ruined, no steady income, outstanding warrants for unpaid tickets that piled up during the chaos. The judge granted April full temporary custody and supervised visitation only for Ethan until he could prove financial stability. He was allowed short visits at a neutral location twice a month, but only if he showed up on time and paid a small fee for the supervisor. I didn't attend any hearings. I didn't need to. The lawyer kept me updated only on matters concerning Grandpa Clyde's estate, which stayed protected. Mom moved into a smaller place alone after the divorce news broke. She stopped trying to contact me directly. No more drives up the road, no more calls. I heard she took a part-time job at a grocery store to cover rent. Friends said she looked tired, avoided talking about family when asked. Ethan bounced between couches and cheap motels. The fake insurance claim they'd counted on never materialized. The company investigated and denied it outright once bank records came to light. Charges for fraud were discussed but never filed. The prosecutor had bigger cases. Still, the damage was done. His name flagged everywhere. No landlord would rent to him without a large deposit he didn't have. Tucker started school in a new district with April. From what little reached me, she was struggling but holding it together for her daughter. I kept my distance. No replies to the occasional desperate texts that still trickled in from unknown numbers. No loans, no advice, no invitations to fix things. The boundary stayed firm. Life at the cabin shifted in quieter ways. Jade and I unpacked every box we'd filled that night. Books back on shelves, art supplies, organized blankets folded on the couch like they'd never been threatened. We painted the guest room a soft blue and turned it into a proper office for my online orders. Spring brought real change. We cleared a patch behind the shed for a raised garden. Ordered seeds, online carrots, lettuce, peas, tomatoes that could handle short seasons. Jade helped build the beds from scrap lumber Grandpa had stored decades ago. We hammered nails side by side, her small hands steady on the board while I drove them in. She chose the layout, drew little signs on popsicle sticks for each row. When the first sprouts pushed through the soil, she checked them every morning before breakfast, watering carefully from her own small can. I replaced rotting deck boards, stained the railing fresh, added solar lights along the path to the garage so nights felt safer. Orders stayed strong. I expanded to custom engraved cutting boards that sold out fast. Money went into repairs savings, a college fund for Jade. Grandpa Clyde's health stabilized once the facility had direct control of payments. I visited every couple weeks, bringing Jade when she wanted. He never asked about Mom or Ethan. We talked about birds at his window, the garden progress, old stories about building the cabin. His eyes lit up when Jade showed him photos of the new plants. Jade changed most of all. She stopped flinching when the phone rang, started inviting a friend from the local homeschool co-op over for playdates. One afternoon, she dragged a ladder out herself to hang a birdhouse she'd painted bright yellow, stood back to admire it without asking if it was okay. She drew constantly, pictures of the cabin, the garden, the pines. One evening, she taped a new one to the fridge, 3 stick figures in front of the log home, me, her Grandpa Clyde holding hands under a green row of vegetables. No one told her to move aside for the photo this time. By early summer, the garden flourished. We picked the first lettuce for salad, ate it on the deck, watching the midnight sun linger. Jade laughed loud when a moose wandered through the yard unafraid. I watched her run after fireflies that appeared in warm evenings and felt something settle deep. Not perfect peace, just certainty. We'd built this, earned it, kept it. The other side faded further. No holiday cards, no updates, no attempts at reconciliation. Their choices had consequences that kept compounding. Ours moved forward. Another full year passed before the next real spring arrived, the kind where the ground thawed deep and new growth pushed through without hesitation. By then, there hadn't been a single call, text, or drive-by from anyone in the old family. No birthday cards for Jade, no updates about Tucker, no attempts from Mom to rebuild bridges. The silence wasn't tense anymore. It was simply there, like the quiet after a long storm has finally moved on. I didn't seek news. What reached me came in fragments from distant acquaintances who still crossed paths with them in town. Ethan had moved farther south, taking whatever work he could find. April kept primary custody. Tucker thrived in a stable routine. Mom lived quietly in her small apartment, working her shifts and keeping to herself. Their lives had shrunk to fit the consequences of choices made long ago. Greed had unraveled them in ways I never wished for, but couldn't have stopped, even if I'd tried. It started with small justifications. Family helps. Family a little here won't hurt. And grew into something that justified taking from an elderly man, from a child's sense of security, from whatever stood in the way. Once the pattern broke, the foundation crumbled. Debt, distrust, separation. They lost more than money. They lost each other. I learned the hardest lessons aren't about winning. They're about recognizing when staying means losing yourself. Setting that boundary wasn't selfish. It was the only way to protect Jade from growing up believing love came with conditions, that her place in the world had to be earned or could be taken away on someone else's whim. She deserved to know home was permanent, that she belonged fully without apology. Watching her now, I saw the difference clear. Jade ran through the yard, calling the cabin ours without hesitation. She led tours for her homeschool friends, pointing out the garden beds she'd helped plan, the birdhouse she'd hung alone, the trail she'd cleared with her own small machete. She spoke about Grandpa Clyde's stories like they were her inheritance too, not something borrowed. One warm afternoon the following spring, she stood on the deck surveying the property like a proud owner. The vegetables were already knee-high berries ripening along the fence line we'd built together. She turned to me with a grin. "This is the best place in the world," she said. "No one can make us leave." I smiled back, feeling the truth of it settle. No one. She went back to weeding her row of carrots, humming under her breath. No fear in her posture. No checking over her shoulder for approval. That was the real closure. Not their downfall. Not my standing firm. It was my daughter claiming her space without doubt, knowing she didn't have to shrink or pack a bag in the night ever again. The cabin stood solid around us, logs weathered but strong, built to last generations. Grandpa Clyde's gift protected. We tended it together. We filled it with laughter that echoed farther than any demand ever could. And in the quiet evenings when the light lingered long, I felt grateful. Not for the pain that led here, but for the strength to choose different. Family isn't always the people you're born to. Sometimes it's the ones you protect, the boundaries you hold, the home you refuse to let anyone take. Jade and I had that. Fully. Finally. It was enough.